I'm gonna be honest with you. Uh, Going into the documentary, because this was a project dating back to 2021, I believe. I didn't really expect much because I feel like at this point, I've heard everything I could possibly hear about Vince McMahon. I'm not going to get anything new, right? If you've watched every wrestling documentary, like me, because I've seen all of them, even the A&E documentaries, there isn't really much you can tell me that I already don't know. As a hardcore fan, casual viewer is completely different. And most of the people who watch this documentary, I'm going to assume are hardcore fans or wrestling fans. It would be nice if this got a big swell of casual viewers, which Netflix does have. Netflix has a huge reach, the biggest reach out of any streaming platform. The only other platform that's bigger than Netflix is YouTube. So there's a possibility it's going to reach a new audience. And if that's the case, ooh. But I figured this would be more appealing to that wrestling audience. And my biggest fear was, okay, it might be well produced. It might give us a few details here and there that might be new. But for the most part, we've seen this before. Well, I can assure you, coming out of the documentary, the best way I can describe it is that if you're looking for a documentary that encompasses what WWE is, but also being honest and truthful about the dark side of the business, more specifically Vince McMahon, you're not going to get a better one than this. I truly believe this is the best, if not one of the best, WWE comprehensive documentaries ever produced. It was so well done. The editing, the amount of stars they got for this. The first 5 minutes, they give you a rundown of everybody they interviewed. And that alone, the stars that they got on this documentary, that alone sold it. Huge names. And I love that they touched on everything. Everything that we know about, yes, but everything. No stone was unturned. Every detail related to Vince McMahon was touched on. Could they have gone into more detail about certain things? Yes. There's one thing in particular I wish they would have dug a little bit more into, and we'll talk about that in a second. But they touched on everything. And one of the things I was hoping for, which I got, was, is this documentary going to expose who Vince McMahon is? Are we going to talk about all of his scandals? Every single one of them. Not just the one with Janelle Grant and the recent, sexual abuse, sex trafficking allegations, but also the Ring Boy scandal. The steroid trial, I'm so sick of that. We'll talk about that in a second, but yes, they did talk about that. Of course, Rita Chatterton. We also had everything revolving around the Chris Benoit situation, Owen Hart. That was a big black mark. Even to this day, that situation with Owen Hart cannot be forgiven. Horrible negligence on Vince McMahon. And of course, going PG, being out of touch. They didn't miss a beat. They covered it all. Here's the crazy part. As much as they covered, and this is just me, I still feel like we didn't get as dark as we could have gotten. Now, what we got was dark. I'm not going to undercut what we got in this documentary. It was seriously one of the best produced documentaries that they could ever give us. Seriously. I just personally feel like if you really look at what he did and you examine all, and I mean this, you examine every aspect of the scandals, and there's even some things they touched on, but didn't really delve deep into how crazy it was. You really could have possibly shown a much darker, gritty, I don't want to say reputation ruining series, but I thought we could have gotten a lot darker. We could have really gone into how fucked up this man is. I will say this, because one of the reasons why I got really excited for this documentary series was days before it came out, Vince McMahon put out a tweet saying that the docuseries is misrepresenting who he is and creates a false narrative for what he does. He put that on Twitter from his own account. And reports came out that Vince tried to buy. He actually wanted to buy the docuseries so it wouldn't release. After watching it, I see why. But even then, I'm like, as bad as it makes you look, they were kind to you. This documentary, although it is damning, absolutely damning, it was very, very kind to Vince, because it could have done a lot more to really paint him as the satanic, evil individual he kind of really is. But the Netflix people probably feel like, you know what? We don't want to go too far down that route because we're in a relationship with the WWE. And if we don't want to, have a conflict of interest with the company and end up making things awkward, because we are going to bring a lot of wrestling fans onto the platform if they're not already here. Like I said, Netflix is literally the biggest streaming platform out of anybody. Any streaming platform that you know of is bigger than that. But we don't want to make that relationship any more awkward than it kind of already is, since we're putting out this documentary. But if you're looking for a documentary that's going to show, Vince is a total scumbag, completely insane, out of his mind, and quite frankly, someone that indeed would do the things he's accused of with Janelle Grant, this is it. This is it. Imagine being a casual viewer, someone that doesn't watch wrestling, turning this on. Oh my goodness. They would be like, how did y'all let this man get away with all this for years? And our answer would be, I don't know. I don't know what we would tell him, because we're so used to seeing him portray this diabolical, evil businessman on TV for decades. It's almost like we're desensitized to it because we're so used to seeing it. But we don't realize, wait a minute, that's on TV. If he did that shit off screen, that's horrible. That kind of man would be seen as a menace to society. But as wrestling fans, and this is our fault because we live in a bubble, we've been so overstimulated, desensitized to violence, to sex. My goodness, like on a regular basis, especially back then, men fall on thumbtacks, we cheer. Women back then were subjected, exploited to some of the most raunchiest, embarrassing, humiliating things. Of course, bra and panties and sex appeal is all that great. Sex appeal, we'll get into that in a second. I just personally feel like when you look back through the decades and you look at everything that we were fed, especially someone like me who grew up watching wrestling as a kid, like 8 years old was when I started. And I started watching during the Attitude Era when it was the raunchiest. I love that Vince McMahon in this documentary, and we'll get to it, I love that Vince McMahon said the Attitude Era was friendly, family friendly, right? Family friendly. It was a small deviation from what they were in 1995, which was PG, but it was still family friendly. Are you serious, bro? The Attitude Era is family friendly? Are we serious? If that was family friendly, I'm scared to know what actual adult TV 14 is for Vince McMahon. Jesus Christ, that was family friendly to Vince. I don't know if that was bad or what he said about Rita Chatterton explicitly saying, and I'm not making this up, this was in the documentary. Vince literally said what they did, what Rita and Vince did, was consensual. But even if it wasn't, and it was the R word, I think we're 10 minutes in, right? I can say, if it was rape, we're past the statute of limitations, so it doesn't matter. I just shook my head at that, because if you're innocent, you don't say stuff like that. People who are innocent vehemently deny they did certain things consistently. They don't give them an out. I did not do it. I did not do it. I did not do it. You never go, well, even if I did do it, I mean, it's too late to complain about it now. Why would you say that? And that's just one of the things he said that just made me go, what? But this documentary, again, I thought was well produced. Overall, one of the best WWE comprehensive documentaries I've seen. The biggest criticism, we'll say this and then we'll get to the actual review. The biggest criticism that is making this documentary not all that great to others is the fact that it doesn't really give us new information. Are there some things that are brought to light that people don't talk much about? Sure. But for the most part, if you've seen all the documentaries, and I mean all of them, WCW versus WWE, ECW Rise and Fall, the Vince McMahon documentary from 2006, all the A&E documentaries, if you are a hardcore WWE nut like me, and you've seen everything that is to possibly see, this documentary doesn't really give you anything new. It takes hints and stuff, even from Dark Side of the Ring. It takes hints and tidbits and kind of compiles it into a well-produced documentary. So that might be a knock for the documentary. Quite frankly, I don't mind you guys retelling some stories. I don't mind them bringing certain things into the fold that is out there. It's information that's out there. It happened. Do you tell the story properly? Are you able to produce this documentary in a way where it feels new, where it makes me, what's the word that they used? It brings out emotion. It helps me really get invested in what you're telling, right? If it's a good documentary, that's all that matters, right? At the end of the day, I thought it was awesome. An excellent documentary, and it did exactly what I was hoping it would do, which was expose Vince McMahon for the scumbag that he is. Did they give him some credit? Yeah, you have to. There would be no wrestling business, no WWE, if Vince didn't do what he did. I wouldn't be here talking about wrestling. You can appreciate that, but also acknowledge this man can't be in the business anymore. All right, let's go ahead and get things started. I'm not going to waste your time because it's a doozy. It's a doozy of a show. All right, so I guess the best place to start is with episode 1. Episode 1 was titled Junior. Those of you who don't know, Vince McMahon Jr. is, of course, who we know about. He came from Vince McMahon Sr., who used to own WWF before Vince bought it and it became WWF. Here's the thing, though, and this is the crazy part about all of this. Vince didn't meet his father, Vince McMahon Sr., until he was 12 years old. Those first 12 years, he spent poor in a trailer park with his mother and a stepfather that abused him daily. Vince said he would beat him up on a daily basis. So he had to learn how to fight at a very young age for survival. Because it got so bad, there were days, he said this, there were days where he was beaten so badly and blacked out. If he woke up and he was still alive, that was a good day. That's not a good upbringing. I'm at the point where if that's how he grew up, we might need to give this guy some legit childhood therapy sessions, because clearly, I don't know, man. That's one of those things where we sure this guy's all right, because there's no way you can be if that's how you grew up. I mean, clearly he's not. I think we all know he's out of his mind. But you hear stories like that and you go, oh, that's why he's crazy. No one should grow up like that. That's horrible. And then when he meets his dad, Vince McMahon Sr., it's not like it was a lovable embracing moment. Essentially what happened was he met his dad. His dad, oh, okay, cool. Hey, Vince, what's good? And then he would fight for the rest of his life to get the approval of his father. Of course, that's kind of like what we see here with, of course, Shane and Vince, and we'll get to that much later. But we see similar things happening with his family right now. But yeah, it's insane knowing that this billionaire conglomerate promoter, a man that created an entire industry, started poor in a trailer park with an abusive family. But isn't that how the stories usually are? Like, the people who are the most rich come from humble beginnings. They come from farms. They either come from like a horrible background where they had to fight for everything that they had. Not everything was handed to them. And then because of that need for survival, they were able to reach higher heights than the normal person who grew up in a very normal household. We've seen stories like that before, but still. It was crazy that that's how we opened it up. I do wish we would have delved a bit more into those 12 years. They simply touch on it. They never go into much detail of what that was about. They just simply said during those 12 years he was abused, not just by his father, but also his mother. His mom apparently sexually abused him. They touched on it for like 10 seconds and they never brought it up again. I was like, this guy really is fucked up. We might want to give him some help. Like, seriously. The documentary shows everybody that was interviewed. And one of my favorite parts of the entire thing was when the show opens, when the documentary series opens in that first episode, they literally just cut to everyone they interviewed. Shane McMahon, Stephanie McMahon, Linda McMahon, Bruce Pritchard, Triple H, Paul Heyman, The Undertaker, Tony Atlas, Hulk Hogan, Bret Hart, Eric Bischoff, Shawn Michaels, Trish Stratus, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, John Cena, Cody Rhodes. I feel like I missed somebody. I'm pretty sure I did. That is a huge lineup. Massive lineup of top tier legendary wrestlers. What was the last documentary that we had with this lineup? Huge. When I saw them cutting all these wrestlers, I'm like, oh, this is legit. And there were certain aspects of it, which we'll get to in a second, where I'm like, did we really need to talk about that? Did that really play into what's happening with Vince? And it made it feel more like a WWE documentary instead of a Vince McMahon story. But again, like, even if you look at it from that perspective, it was well produced, and it was made for WWE fans, so it can just be perceived as a great WWE documentary. Let's go ahead and get more into what we talked about here. So we know some of this stuff already. When Vince got started, he was an announcer, and WWF or WWF wasn't very good at it. We all know that. But what he brought to the table was emotion. He made up for his lack of knowledge. He didn't really know the moves. He wasn't someone that was versed in the... How do I put this? If you asked him to describe a pile driver or a a 630 splash, or, he wouldn't be able to tell you. He'd be, what a maneuver! But he would put over the moment. He was very good at storytelling and, of course, getting you invested in the moment. This is a big moment. Something's happening here. Look at this. Oh my God. And then he would try to pull a certain emotion out of you with his words, which is a very good skill, a very important skill to have as a commentator, as an announcer. And he did that pretty well. So we'll give him credit for at least being good at that. And we saw that, of course, emulated throughout his time in WWE. And I believe he was really instrumental in terms of really bringing in the right people to help facilitate those stories on commentary. The Jim Rosses, the Tony Schiavones, and many others. The Jerry the King Lawlers, the Gorilla Monsoons and stuff. And then, of course, when his dad stepped down, Vince McMahon, took over. Initially, this is something I didn't know. Initially, Vince McMahon Sr. wanted to sell the company to Gorilla Monsoon. Gorilla Monsoon was the apparent heir once Vince stepped down. But what happened was, Vince Sr. told Vince, if you want this company, buy it from me. Vince said, okay, we'll make a deal. I'll make 4 payments, and then I'll make a final payment. If I miss any of those payments, you keep the money and the company's still yours. Vince didn't miss any of the payments, and the company was his. And he got the money from working with his dad. He basically used the money he got from working under his father and then gave it right back to him to buy the company. Nice. That's a smart businessman there, because he pretty much knew that, well, I'll just use the money that you were giving me anyways. Now, they do touch on there being some tension between Vince and his dad about the direction of the company, because his father was straight up a pure pro wrestling promoter. Like a lot of the territorial Verne Gagne's and other territorial wrestling promoters then. They cared about the pro wrestling business. Vince wanted more. He saw that the landscape and the world was changing. National cable was becoming a thing. And he felt like wrestling could appeal to a bigger audience. Ultimately, we find out that he was right. And so he ended up coining the term sports entertainment. And then he started breaking all the wrestling traditions. And this is where people get on Vince for killing the territories. Can I be honest with you? Because we talk about Vince McMahon started to host the cities and all these territories, and then he, I guess, broke the unseen barriers. You're not supposed to cross these lines. You're not supposed to promote your shows in this territory. That's just something we don't do. You respect the territorial agreements between other promoters. Vince didn't. And in my opinion, why would he? If I'm in competition with you and I'm trying to build my own brand, why can't I host my shows in your state, in your territory? My thing is this: if he's the better company, if he's putting on the better show, then that's on you. A lot of these territories, yes, you had AWA, you had NWA, you had Georgia South Wrestling, you had World-Class Championship Wrestling down here in Texas, and you had a couple of others, All Atlantic Wrestling, blah, 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 blah. There were some other wrestling territories that were crap. Straight up doo-doo. I'm sorry. Well, the territories were such a great time for wrestling. Other than the ones I named you, the 4 or 5 territories that were well known, all the other ones were not great. And you know I'm telling the truth. So quite frankly, Vince made the business better when he said, nah, I'm not just going to have Maine be my territory. I'm going to expand. Let me see how far I can expand my audience. You don't think Verne Gagne and all these other promoters would have done the same thing if they had the money? Get the hell out of here. So no, I'm not going to blame Vince for killing the territories. The reality is, other than a couple of the territorial NWA's AWA territories, a lot of them were crap anyways. Vince understood where the time was, and he grew with it. And so the natural expansion of WWF, and the documentary says it, effectively ended the territories. Because Vince started buying up all the talent. And all he did was just offer them more money. The Junkyard Dogs, the Hulk Hogans, the Roddy Pipers, the Randy Savages, the Bret Harts, the Mr. Perfects. He didn't really do anything that, again, the other promoters wouldn't have done. He just offered them more money. That's it. You're stealing talent. Stealing talent. You can come work for me doing the exact same thing in front of a bigger audience with more money. What are you going to choose to do? Yes, there are those that remain loyal to their companies, but at the end of the day, these men had families to feed and lives to live and aspirations. You would be crazy if you didn't work for WWF. Now, we'll get more into how well this turned out for them, but I'm not going to give Vince a hard time whatsoever, at all, for doing what was logical for business. You want to grow, you want to expand your business nationally, you host more shows in different states, and you pay the talent more. Simple as that.
Even your Houston city had a territory as well.
Sure did. I forgot what it was called. I just know about World Class Championship Wrestling, which was the main territorial promotion here. So that's just me. I'm not trying to shit on the territories or say that it was not a great time to be a wrestling fan. I just personally believe this idea, this logic gap, that everything was better with the territories, when in reality, we all know that's not true. It got better with Vince McMahon at the helm. They get into Hulk Hogan and WrestleMania. Those of you who don't know, originally Hulk Hogan was working with Vince McMahon Sr., and then he got this gig to play in Rocky III. Vince McMahon Sr. told him, if you take that movie role, you're fired. And Hogan said, deuces! The best thing Hogan could have done. And I'm happy he said no, because that put him in the spotlight, gave him national fame, and then he took that popularity, took it to AWA, did good business for them, learned how to be Hulkamania, and then got hired by Vince Jr. Originally, this was interesting. Originally, Vince McMahon Jr. wanted Dusty Rhodes to be the face of WWF, because at the time, he was literally the most popular wrestler. And I'm not lying. When you think about the most popular wrestlers ever, at one point in time, there was no one popular than Dusty Rhodes. Period. But Dusty didn't believe in Vince McMahon's vision, because Dusty wanted to run his own company. So I would venture to think maybe Dusty Rhodes felt he could do the business better than Vince. And I also think that's why when Dusty started working for Vince, he put Dusty in polka dots to embarrass him. Because he wanted Dusty to be the face. And Dusty said, I don't believe in your vision. You damn right Vince held a grudge against that. And that's why he gave him polka dots. So, when Dusty said no, he went with Hulk Hogan. I love that they touch on Hogan teaming with Bob Backlund. Because Bob Backlund was Vince Sr.'s top guy. After Bruno Sammartino came Bob Backlund. And they were tag teaming at one point. Bob and Hogan were tag teaming. We know the story of Iron Sheik being the evil foreigner who hates America. He ended up beating Bob Backlund, ended his long tenure as champion. And then Hulk Hogan was the one to beat Iron Sheik, made him the face of WWF. Massive fan response. And of course, that led to, WrestleMania. I did put this note in there. During this time when WWF was surging in success, because why wouldn't you be able to take advantage of all of this national cable expansion with the way Vince McMahon did? Vince Sr. expressed his pride for Vince Jr. Say he was proud of his success because he was becoming successful. And the very next day, after telling Vince that he's proud of him, he passed away at the age of 69. I thought that was crazy. So Vince just kind of did the whole, okay, attaboy, Vince. Okay, that's great, Vince. Good for you. Kind of did that to him until literally on his deathbed, he finally said, I'm proud of you, Vince. Man. Are we sure Vince is okay? No, he's not okay. Clearly he's not. When you look at this stuff, you go, yeah, you wonder why he screwed up. They talk about TNT. I'm going to be honest with you. I know about Tuesday Night Titans. It was a talk show that Vince did. It was a legit talk show that was used to showcase wrestlers, their characters, and advance storylines before the events. Because back then, you didn't have weekly television. You didn't. You had what was called Saturday Night's Main Event. Right? Saturday Night's Main Event. And then, of course, the pay-per-views, which was WrestleMania. And when did SummerSlam come around? You had, like, what? 1 or 2 pay-per-views. And then mostly Saturday Night's Main Event, which aired quarterly. So, in between that time, you needed something to help fans connect with the wrestlers. So you had TNT, which was their way of introducing characters and storylines and stuff. And it was, in my opinion, it was actually very well produced. At one point in time, I think they let Bobby Heenan host some of the shows, and he was awesome. Oh, he was great. They didn't talk about that. It kept it on Vince. But, yeah, it was one of those things where kind of odd when you think about it now. But back then, I can tell you, it was probably just so fun to watch for that audience. I think after this, they talked about Vince's WrestleMania controversies, right? Yep, this is when we get into WrestleMania 1. He formed some partnerships, we know this, with Cyndi Lauper, Mr. T, David Letterman was actually instrumental in helping to get some publicity for WrestleMania as well. Let's get into the craziness around WrestleMania 1. There was an interviewer, a journalist, if you will, called John Stossel, who tried to expose wrestling as fake. Now, this was in the 80s. During this time, were there some fans that thought wrestling was scripted, predetermined? Yes, but for the most part, this was still new. This was new to a lot of people. They thought it was real. Kayfabe was strong with this one. And so back then, for someone to come out and say it's fake was absolutely sacrilege. And so we get to a wrestler called David Schwartz. I said his name right? Schwartz. And we know the incident. And they touched on it. I mean, Dark Side of the Ring did a documentary on it, but I didn't think they were going to go there here. They did. David was told that wrestling is scripted, it is fake. John Stossel got his ass slapped as a result. Slapped him on camera. And apparently, this is alleged by Tony Atlas, he was encouraged to do it by Vince McMahon. Because Vince McMahon went backstage in the men's locker room and said, someone should take care of that guy. Wink, wink. Someone should take care of that guy. And so Tony alleges that Vince influenced David to slap John Stossel. As you would know, he would sue WWF, which was settled. But that wasn't the only controversial thing that happened. Because Hogan would do it was some type of a live TV interview with Richard Belzer. Belzer, right? Richard Belzer. And he was also trying to play up the idea that wrestling's not real and you don't really hurt each other. And when he asked Hulk Hogan to put him in an actual headlock, Hogan gave him a real headlock. And he passed out and gave him a concussion when he hit on the ground. He fell head first on the ground, got a concussion. And let's just say Hogan got in a lot of trouble for that, because that was another lawsuit. WrestleMania was played with its controversies. There was one story they didn't talk about, because I didn't think they would. I told you. There are some things they touched on but kind of left out. During this time, Vince McMahon had mortgaged all his stuff. He bet literally his house on WrestleMania. And a lot of people were kind of worried that this wasn't going to work out. It did, but there was that feeling of, okay, if this doesn't turn out well, I lose everything. There was a story that some of that money came from the mob. Like a dark mob. I'm not making this up. I feel like
I'm surprised Black Saturday wasn't mentioned.
interesting. I didn't think about that either. That was something they didn't mention either. There was a lot of things that they could have touched on to make it darker. You're right. But they covered the key points. But yeah, like, that was a story about how some of that money came from the mob. They were really putting everything, and when I say everything, I mean everything on WrestleMania. And it paid off. It was a huge, booming success. And it really, really elevated WWF into that national fame stratosphere. It became a household brand, company. And with that exposure comes more lawsuits and more controversies, which we'll get into with episode 2. So that was episode 1. Not much to really take home from it. It was outside of Vince McMahon growing up in a trailer park with a poor family and getting abused, which was like, whoa. And of course, seeing the lineup of wrestlers who they were talking to. Most of this stuff we know. It's nothing new, but I loved how it was produced. I thought overall it did a great job of highlighting the importance of WrestleMania 1, really talking about bringing in Mr. T and Cyndi Lauper. Cyndi Lauper was massive back then in the 80s. So getting her really helped, really helped WWF. But that was just episode 1. Episode 2, oof. Now we get into some crazy shit. So with episode 2, they spoke about the evolution of wrestling in the 80s, but also would get into more of the darker parts of the wrestling business at that time. They opened up with Vince McMahon's Stand Back music video. Remember that? Stand back, stand back! Hulk Hogan on the guitar. Who did Hulk Hogan say he used to play for? Metallica? Hulk Hogan said he played for Metallica. I'm not making that up. He said he played for Metallica. Lord have mercy. Some of you actually believed him when he said that, too. Vince can't sing worth a shit. Hilarious video. Absolutely hilarious video just to go back and laugh at. He really thinks he's a good performer. This man thought he was Frank Sinatra. And he would be feeling himself when he's singing, too. Stand back! Stand back! Sorry, it's just, when they opened up with that, I said, oh Lord, here we go. I thought it was hilarious. So like I said, they speak on the expansion of WWF and the transformation of the business, especially around 1984, 1985, where it was astronomical. When they did, this is after WrestleMania 3, by the way, when they did Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant on a Saturday night's main event, I'm not making this up, they did 33 million viewers, a 33.0. Think about how many viewers that is. How many households that is. 33.0. AEW can't even get 1.0. They were doing 33.0 back then. That's how big wrestling was. Granted, they wasn't going on every week. They did it quarterly. But still, that's a lot of viewers. Unfortunately, this increase in popularity came with a cost. Although some of the matches weren't taped, these wrestlers were still doing the touring. Because remember, WWF had expanded their business across the country nationally. So they were still touring and doing events, even though they weren't taped nationally. They wasn't airing live syndicate. They were still going to house shows and performing. They ended up working 7 days a week for 52 weeks a year. No days off. Unless you got hurt. I'm not making that up. There was no days off. In the 1980s, if you got hurt and you couldn't work, you made no money. This wasn't a guaranteed paid contract situation. They didn't do that back then. They had handshake deals. You wanted to make some money, you had to work. And the wrestlers were getting paid dog shit. Unless you were Hulk Hogan or a big time name, they didn't make that much money. They didn't. It wasn't a lavishing lifestyle the way it is now. Nowadays, you sign a contract for $500K to $1 million. You'll get maybe 3 days out of the week you work. And then, especially nowadays with Triple H, he'll give you like a full week off. Some weeks he just won't use you and tell you to take a break, but still pay you more money. So the way the business is nowadays is a blessing. It is so much better than it was back then because you didn't have guaranteed contracts. You didn't work, you didn't get paid, you didn't eat. So this led to a lot of performers injured, and you know how this works. You get hurt, then you start to use painkillers, you get hooked on painkillers, then you get hooked on other drugs, and then you start to spiral downward, and that led to the whole dark history of drugs in wrestling. Because the wrestlers were overworked. They were overworked. Some people could handle it, others couldn't. Wrestlers were exploited. Vince exploited his wrestlers. Which is why Jesse the Body Ventura, I really wish. This is one of the ones that I'm like, ooh, I wish we would have dug more into this one. Jesse the Body Ventura tried to start a union. I think you guys know about this, right? He tried to establish a union and was actually going to do it. He actually had the support of wrestlers who were overworked, who wanted to, get paid more and work less dates. But guess who screwed it up? Oh, you know who screwed it up. Brother. Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan ultimately exposed Ventura's plans to Vince. And this is what Vince did. Vince told all the wrestlers, hey, you guys have an issue with me? Come talk to me. Come tell me about it. No one said shit. And the union idea died. Honestly, because of incidents like this is why they don't try to do unions anymore. I mean, Zelina Vega tried to do it as well. But the reason why we don't try to do unions is for that very reason. A lot of these wrestlers need this. And they know if they spoke up, they're replaceable. They're not irreplaceable. They'll bring someone else in the very next day to give them their job. And then now they're out of luck. They were better off just keeping their mouth shut. Yes, they were in pain. Yes, they were overworked. But they would rather just deal with the shit than end up losing that job. But yeah, Hogan snitched. I honestly think if Jesse the Body Ventura was to have gone through with what he did, the wrestlers would be in a much different situation now. Because let's just call it like it is. Vince could have paid them a lot more than he did. For real. Vince could have paid these wrestlers a lot more. Especially back then. So it wouldn't have hurt to increase their pay and give them some days off. But Vince is crazy. He's a workaholic, man. It's all about the grind, brother. But that's one of those aspects of the documentary I really wish they would have dug into. But they touched on it at least, so that's good. We know about WrestleMania 2. Very ambitious. They tried to do 3 multi-cast events, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and it bombed. It wasn't great. WrestleMania 3 we know about, of course, the Pontiac Silverdome, 93,000. We don't know if that's true or not. Vince says they sold out 93,000. If you watch the event, it had a big audience. Whether it was 78 or 93, that is a huge number. Do not scoff at 78,000. Oh, it was 93. I'm sorry. 78,000 is massive. Do you know? Bro, I went to an event, just to kind of give you an idea what I'm talking about. I went to an event, it was an event for, forgot what it was. Someone invited me to come see someone speak. It was a speaking event. Anyways, had about 200 people, 200, 300 people in there. When I tell you, it was standing room only. 200, 300 people. It was standing room only. People don't understand how big 78,000 people are. People don't know. You don't know. You underestimate this stuff. So when they go back and forth between it's 78,000, 93,000, somewhere between attendance figures, I'm happy Netflix just simply said, does it fucking matter? Does it actually fucking matter? It's a big number. As long as it's not like 2,000 AEW, as long as it's not like very low, 78,000, 93,000, it was a big event. Huge. They also mentioned there's actually no way to determine the real number. Because there's too many factors you have to suggest, you have to get into. So, we all know that event was headlined by Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. Big moment, Hogan slams Andre. They talk about the story of Andre not telling Hulk Hogan to finish, or if he's going to let him win, to screw with Hulk Hogan. Vince signed on to that. At first, when I heard that story, I was kind of like, is that true? Is Hogan making that up? Nope, Vince signed on to it. He said, no, that was true. Andre purposely kept the finish away from Hogan. But then when it actually happened, it meant a lot more to him. So this is where it gets kind of crazy. And episode 2 is where they start digging into what kind of a scumbag Vince McMahon is. Just the start of it. Hulk Hogan, as you guys know, was the man. He was the focal point. He was the Babe Ruth of wrestling at this time. Before there was The Rock, before there was Stone Cold, there was Hulk Hogan. He was the first nationally big-time superstar, megastar, if you will, that transcended wrestling into Hollywood. He was the first one to do that. Yes, Bruno Sammartino was also popular, but Bruno wasn't on the level. Even Bruno Sammartino wasn't as popular as Hulk Hogan became. Hogan was huge. The kind of celebrity that couldn't go anywhere. He couldn't go anywhere without getting flooded by a big audience. And his victory at WrestleMania really helped that as well. WrestleMania 3, of course. He tried to go to Hollywood, get some things going, but Vince said, nah, I would rather you work for me. They created No Holds Barred. I've never seen No Holds Barred. I'm never going to. I've heard it was shit. Literally. Literally shit. And there is shit involved in the movie. So that's appropriate. But then they start talking about Vince McMahon getting cold on Hogan because his popularity fell off around the 1990s. They say his popularity fell off in 1990. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think Hulk Hogan got cold, in my opinion, and again, this is before I started watching wrestling. But last I checked, fans didn't start booing Hulk Hogan until like 92. 91, 92, right? That's when fans were just kind of like, yeah, I'm not feeling this guy. He was super over in the 1980s. I think 90, 91, he was still pretty good. I did kind of feel like 91 was when fans was like, all right, I'm getting kind of sick of this. But 92 is when fans started booing him. Because I remember he got booed at the Rumble when he eliminated, when he helped Ric Flair eliminate Sid Vicious. So, around that period was when he got cold. They make it seem like he was cold way before then. Like when Ultimate Warrior came in, that was like when he was cold. That's not true. I don't believe that. But that's the narrative that Vince McMahon puts out there. That's what he believes. But anyways, they talk about wanting to bring in someone else to replace Hogan. And they couldn't. They couldn't do it. I think this is where they talk about Sergeant Slaughter's storyline as well. Yep, the Iraqi sympathizer. So, around this time, America was involved in what was called the Gulf War. And there was a real war conflict in Iraq. Sergeant Slaughter was, you know him, he was an American patriot, a character, of course, of the Army, American Army. And Vince decided, you know, it would be really good to really get people to care and watch our product if we took the American hero, the American patriot, and make him join the enemy and become an Iraqi sympathizer. Like I said, around this time, people thought wrestling was real. Or they took it as something that was real life, if anything else. So when Sergeant Slaughter was playing this character, he got death threats. Legit death threats. I'm not making this up. He got that much heat. People would watch this. If you wasn't a wrestling fan and you watched this as a casual viewer, you'd be like, why would you do that? And that is one of those things where I look back on and go, yeah, I don't think that's probably something we should have done. I get that you're trying to play to what's popular, follow the trends and stuff, which I respect. But, you know, that is one of those things where you cross the line. It reminds me of Muhammad Hassan. Remember Muhammad Hassan when the 9/11 attacks hit and they brought him in to play one of the people who, oh Jesus, it was bad. It was bad. Muhammad Hassan was such a controversial character, and I'm not making this up either. UPN, which hosted SmackDown, that was network for SmackDown, they literally said, we will take you off the air if you bring on Muhammad Hassan. We will take you off the air if you bring on this controversial anti-American. Think about that. That was 2005, right? Imagine doing that nowadays. Oh, shoot. Imagine doing that nowadays. Crazy, man. Anyways, yeah. Vince loves his anti-Americans. But we all know the story. Hogan ends up being Sergeant Slaughter, real American, world champion, he saved America, all that kind of stuff. And they talk about the audience's fatigue with Hulk Hogan, which eventually led him to retiring in 1993. And what did he do after that? He got bored of Hollywood, and then he came back to work for WCW. And it was the same thing that Vince did in the territories. Ted Turner promised Hulk Hogan more money with a less schedule. Now, Vince felt betrayed when this happened. I don't know why he felt betrayed. That's exactly what he did in the territories. You know, everything that Vince did to Vern Gagne and all those other promotional promoters back in the day, territorial promoters, when they started doing that to him, then he wants to cry victim. That's one of those things about Vince I cannot stand. I hate about him. It's okay for him to do it, but the moment someone does it to him, he has an issue. And someone called him out for that. The interviewer called him out. Vince is like, that's not okay. How dare Ted Turner take my talent away from me? And the interviewer said, but Vince, didn't you do the same thing to the promoters back in the territory days? And Vince was like, well yeah, it might be hypocritical, but it's all about controlling the narrative. You gotta control the narrative. You say it because you want people to understand your side. And if you say it, that makes you in charge of the narrative. So in other words, lie and manipulate the situation to where you're the good guy. Vince was, that's not even touching how big of a scumbag he is. But that's one of those things where you're like, dude, business is business, right? Don't get mad that people are using your tactics against you. We call that ego. Ego. Let's talk about it. Phil Mushnick. The haters. The top hater. When you talk about one of the biggest detractors, WWF, WWE Professional Wrestling, period, they don't get any bigger than Phil Mushnick. You think I'm a WWE hater or an AEW hater. I ain't no Phil Mushnick. This man hated Vince McMahon. Despised him. Openly. When they interviewed him, he said, I hate Vince McMahon because he's a scumbag. He's not lying. He's not lying. Vince is a piece of garbage, if I'm being honest with you. He is a scumbag. But we talk about the tabloids back then. And one of the many scandals that Phil Mushnick talked about was the steroid trial. Okay. out of all the scandals that we will get into, this one, I'm sorry, I think it's the biggest bullshit scandal involving Vince McMahon. It's bullshit. Before I even get into what they talked about, steroids were legal in the 80s. They were legal. All of the celebrities, athletes, bodybuilders were using it. It was just a natural part of being in that industry. All your favorites, Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, they all use steroids to create a certain physique because that's what appealed on national television, right? But somewhere around then, I think 1988, Ronald Reagan said, "War on drugs, it's illegal now." And so what was legal just became illegal. And because steroids was such a natural part and integral part of wrestling identity of the industry, it's not like they could just stop doing it. It's like, wait, what we're doing now is bad? But it wasn't bad a year ago. What? And so a lot of the times, people get a bad rep when it comes to steroids back then, simply because, well, look, we built our industry off of this, and now you're telling us it's not good. So what were we supposed to do? Just stop doing it? No, like, we're making all this money for this look. If I stop doing it, I lose money. So we already know how this came about. One of the doctors that was involved was selling, I forgot the name of the doctor, y'all might know it, was selling steroids to the wrestlers backstage. Would even price gouge it to make wrestlers pay more. And apparently, the federal government got a hold of this and indicted him. And because Vince McMahon was connected to it, he got in trouble too, because it was his company. This came at the time when he was doing the World Bodybuilding Federation. Hold on for a minute. Pause. We know about the WBF, right? The World Bodybuilding Federation. Vince tried to do another venture where he tried to literally get into the bodybuilding business. Everyone says that failed because of the timing. It failed because Vince McMahon was embroiled in the steroid scandal. And of course, with bodybuilding, they use a lot of steroids, so it was just not a good look. Can I be honest with y'all? The World Bodybuilding Federation failed because it sucked. It was boring. And nobody tried to watch that. Seriously. Vince tried to do WWF with World Bodybuilding. It fucked. It sucked. It fucked and it sucked. It was terrible. It had nothing to do with, oh, it was a steroid scandal. It's a bad look for me. No, it was just bad. It would have felt regardless. I just want to put that out there. That's just like a terrible idea that people don't want to admit was a terrible idea because ego. Ego. But he says the fallout from the steroid trial forced him to close the WBF. Sure. What really got him in trouble was when Hulk Hogan showed up on the Arsenio Hall TV show, and he was asked about using steroids. And Hulk Hogan being Hulk Hogan, vehemently denied using steroids. Really, Hulk? Really, Hulk Hogan? You of all people, even back then, you of all people tried to deny you used steroids. And even Vince admitted he took steroids. Look at Vince McMahon. Have you seen Vince McMahon when he wrestles? You can't tell me he doesn't use steroids. You know damn well. Looking at these men, look at the people they had on television. Not just Hulk Hogan, but literally every other wrestler. The Sid Viciouses. Sid Justice at the time. The Ultimate Warriors. Even Mr. Perfect. Like, you can't look at these chiseled Greek gods and tell me they don't use steroids. And Hulk Hogan was at the top of the branch. That was stupid. Even back then, that was stupid. Everyone could look at him and go, you lying. And yeah, that really put the scandal at the forefront. Just Hogan just telling lies, which is part of the course when it comes to Hulk Hogan. But ultimately, we know how this worked. Vince McMahon went to trial for it. He called the federal government and Justice Department a bunch of bullies. Just a bunch of bullies. When in reality, let's just call it like it is. Vince had nothing to do with this. They were saying Vince told these guys to use steroids. He never told them to use steroids. They chose to use it. Now, did Vince push certain people that had a certain look? Sure, maybe that can be implied that he wants them to use steroids, but he never verbally communicated to people, hey, we want you to use steroids. So the entire premise of the trial was just fucked from the get-go. It was never going to work. Vince was always going to win. So when you see these stories of him wearing a neck brace, trying to get sympathy from the jury, which he probably did, he actually, and they didn't touch on this. I wish they would have touched on it. During that time, Vince was actually calling jurors. He was trying to bribe jurors. Yes, tampering. He tried to bribe jurors to, help him be not guilty, which actually hurt his case. That actually happened. They didn't touch on that part. I think that, well, actually that's not true. They did touch on it for a little bit, but they didn't delve into that because that was a scandal on its own. That was crazy. But he didn't need to do all that. He was safe from the get-go. Like, it wasn't his fault. I just thought out of everything about this, the one thing that made me laugh, the one thing that I thought was absolutely hilarious was Hogan lying about not using steroids. That shit was just great to me. That's one of those, is he fucking serious right now? That's just funny. But the steroid trial, anyone sitting here thinking that this is a black mark on Vince McMahon, I don't see how you can blame this on him. I hate that he took the brunt of this. There are many other things he should take the brunt for. This is one of those things where I'm not going to blame on Vince. So I'm happy he beat the government. That being said, the other stuff they talked about is totally Vince McMahon's fault. Let's talk about Jimmy Snuka. So, we all know about Superfly Jimmy Snuka and his controversy. Nancy Argentino, his girlfriend, was murdered. Initially, they said she died due to an accident. But due to the blunt force trauma and bruises, they ruled it as a homicide. And the person that was with her during that time, the only person, was Jimmy Snuka. And those of you who don't know, he has a history of abusing women. If you talk to Tony Atlas, he isn't the only one. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, like at the time, it was clear he killed her. But for some reason, Vince McMahon got involved. And there's a story of him going to the police station with a suitcase that had money in it, probably. And all of a sudden, the charges are dropped. What? They had clear evidence that Jimmy killed this woman. He killed her. He's a murderer. But no charges. Because Vince McMahon went to the police station with a briefcase with money, guaranteed. And what? What charges? I don't know anything about a murder. Jimmy Snuka's a legend. What are you talking about? He had nothing to do with that. Craziness. That's the shit Vince did. He got a murder off. He literally helped a murderer escape jail. Come on, man. Come on. But it's good for business. Yo, Vince, really? Especially, look, Jimmy Snuka was popular. He was one of the most popular wrestlers, especially during that time. But it's not like he didn't have a full roster of already more popular talent. This was like 1988, I think, right? The 1980s, if anything else. Like, Jimmy Snuka wasn't gonna be drawing a big audience like Hulk Hogan did. So, that was... maybe he owed Jimmy some. Maybe he owed him one. But yeah, that's one of the many stories that doesn't get talked about enough. And then we get to the Ring Boy scandal. If you are a hardcore wrestling fan, at some point in time, you've heard about this story. Those of you who don't know, again, back in the 80s, I think around the 80s and 90s, there was an executive named Mel Phillips who would hire these ring boys to come set up the ring, tuck it down, and during their sessions, when they were setting up the ring, Mel Phillips would make the boys do explicit, X-rated things. They did some sexual favors for him against their will. And there were other executives involved. I think it was Terry Garvin, and the most infamous one, Pat Patterson. Tons of stories of Pat Patterson going around grabbing men by the junks. Now we know that Pat Patterson was openly gay at the time, so it's one of those things where Pat Patterson is respected from that standpoint, but also he's not, because he would force himself on people. And this ring boy scandal, I'm gonna be honest with you. Everyone talks about the steroid trial. I'm shocked the ring boy scandal didn't just kill WWF. Can we just say that? How the hell did Vince McMahon survive the ring boy scandal? Let this shit happen nowadays. It's over. Let the WWF be involved with someone forcing himself sexually, especially on little boys. Oh my goodness. That would straight up kill WWF's reputation. But Vince gets a lot of flack for this because he knew about it. He knew about the ring boy scandal. And he tried to cover it up. That's what was crazy about it. Of course, he settled the matter with the boys who were abused, but you can't defend this. I think he told Pat Patterson to resign, but then he hired him right back because he was the head of creative. He was the head booker. But when he came back, Pat Patterson still kept on touching men's junks. That's unacceptable, bro. Horrible. Believe it or not, this isn't even the worst of it. We all know about Rita Chatterton. So, quick shout out to the Super Chat champion, 3 Diglets, who asked this question. Who's Rita? Well, Rita Chatterton was the first female referee. Literally the first female referee to ever referee for WWE. Blonde hair, very attractive. Vince tried to make her a center point. Like, she was the Aubrey Edwards. The Aubrey Edwards before there was an Aubrey Edwards. There was a story. Here we go. There was a story about Vince McMahon getting into a sexual encounter with her, where he forced himself on her and made her do explicit acts. He sexually assaulted her, essentially. I don't even think it's far enough when I say he probably raped her. But she says that he assaulted her. He forced himself on her. She did a full interview about it on national television. It got a lot of media attention. It was everywhere. But when asked about this, y'all would have to see this part to believe me, because I'm not making this up. When Vince McMahon was asked about this in 2021, Vince said the following. Well, you're a rapist if people say you're a rapist. But,
Personally, I'd say this documentary is part Vince, part history of the WWE, WWF remake, compared to the 2013 doc, if I'm getting the year right.
I think you're getting it right, kind of. Probably a little bit off with that, but yeah, so when Vince McMahon was asked, about this scandal, this affair that he was having, he said the following. You're only a rapist when you're called a rapist, but it was consensual. However, although, if it was rape, the statute of limitations had run out. Did he really just say that? Did he really just say, I feel like Booker T. Tell me he didn't just say that. I had to rewind it. I was like, let me back this up and hear that again. No, he said that. Even if it was rape, too bad the statute of limitations ran out. What? Wait a minute. So, he's okay with it as long as the statute of limitations run out. That should be damning enough. Hearing him say that I already knew he probably did it based off of the evidence, but hearing him say that just solidified it. You totally raped her. You did that shit. You totally did that. You probably did the same thing to that Tang Salon woman in 2006. He did it. And he totally did it to Janelle Grant. When you hear someone say that, and again, this isn't like it was Vince in his 30s or in his 40s. This is Vince McMahon and 2021 when they interviewed him for this? This was Vince McMahon in 2021. He's in his 70s at the time. When you're in your 70s, you're set in your ways. For that to come out of his mouth, yo. He was Diddy before it was a Diddy. Seriously. This man made Diddy look like an innocent man. That's disgusting. At least Diddy denied it. And Diddy, Kim, throw Diddy underneath the jail. But at least Diddy was smart enough to go, listen, I didn't do these things, and I can prove it, blah, 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 blah. He at least denied. Vince just straight up said, hey, even if I did it, it's too late. The live chat, you sick freak. Horrible. To me, that was like, man, turn this shit off. Get me to the next episode. This guy is disgusting. Oh, man. But yeah, Rhea Chatterton was one of the 4 women, I think, that was settled in that $12 million lawsuit. I think she got like, what was it, $7.5 million? Oh, she got a lot of money. But she's one of 4 that Vince committed these acts against. I'm sorry. You can sit here all day and try to convince me that Vince didn't do it. If that's what you want to do. Hearing him say that, I don't need to hear anything else. He totally did that shit. That was episode 2. Yeah, what a way to end episode 2, right? I'm not gonna speed run necessarily episode 3, but we know about episode 3. It focused on the Montreal screw job. It focused on Hulk Hogan leaving, going to WCW, the New Generation era. Of course, a couple of names in there. It's not necessarily. This is one of those instances where people say, well, I've heard this before. It's nothing new. But again, I like it from the standpoint of it was very well produced. Again, if you're looking at this as a WWE documentary, I feel like this is one of the best ones they've done. But episode 3, they open up with Wendy Richter. We know about Wendy Richter. Before there was the Montreal screw job, there was the Richter screw job. Vince McMahon recalls how Richter became problematic because she refused to lose the women's championship. So, he forced it. He made her lose it. Just like he made Brett lose it to Shawn. There was a woman in a mask called the Spider. And the bell rung. The Spider rolled her up. 1, 2. Richter kicked out, but the referee counted 3. And she lost the match. The Spider removes her mask, and it was Fabulous Moolah. No, we didn't talk about her. We could have talked about her, but let's be honest. Fabulous Moolah, trust me when I say this, I don't think she should. To be fair, Vince shouldn't get the blame for Fabulous Moolah. Quite frankly, Fabulous was more popular under Vince McMahon Sr. So, we didn't talk about her scandals here. But yeah, Wendy Richter got screwed over by Vince because she didn't want to do business. We didn't see her again. We never saw her after that. But we know about that. We know about Randy Richter's screw job. If you didn't, yeah, Vince screwed a lot of people over. Literally and figuratively. Yeah, we're there. We're there with Vince. Sorry. Vince talked about why he would do these things to certain people. His answer is, I didn't care. Life is unfair. Deal with it. Okay. I'll remember to say that, Vince, when you get arrested and go to jail. When they put you in jail, I'll be like, well, I don't care. Life is unfair. Deal with it. But yeah, they talk about Hulk Hogan testifying against Vince during the steroid trial, where Hogan essentially said, he didn't tell me to use steroids. So what do you want me to say? And he didn't. But apparently they had something on Hulk Hogan, and they thought they were going to use Hulk Hogan to be like the final nail in Vince McMahon's coffin, where he would testify and say he told me to use it. Nah, he straight up said, no, he didn't make me use it. So who cares? But when Vince won that trial, do you know what that does to your ego? To say you beat the federal government at their own game? You beat the federal government that has like a 99%, 95% win rate? He beat them in court. You know he thought he was invincible. But as a result of the trial, we know that, okay, well, we can't have these big muscular men come around. We have to scale back now. So now we get to the new generation era. We see them push The Undertaker, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Diesel, 1-2-3 Kid, Razor Ramon, and the one he wanted to be the new face, Lex Luger. Jesus Christ. So much stuff we're leaving off the table. That's another one where I'm like, damn, that's a whole documentary by itself. But Lex Luger was going to be the face, and he just didn't work out. Here's the thing, though. When it comes to Lex Luger, it could have actually worked out. Like in, 1993? The Lex Express was over. The booking sucked. His booking was garbage. Like, I think at SummerSlam, he fought Yokozuna. All he had to do was just beat Yokozuna clean. But he didn't. He beat Yokozuna by DQ, and he celebrated like, yay, I beat Yokozuna! I'm the greatest. No, you're not. Lex, you didn't win the title. You didn't. You lost. You lost the chance to win the title. You won by DQ. Why are we celebrating? So, the Lex Luger story, in and of itself, is a whole different thing, but they touch on that. We already know about a lot of these wrestlers going to WCW. I'm not going to rehash a lot of this stuff. The same reason a lot of the territorial wrestlers went to WWF is the same reason a lot of these WWF wrestlers went to WCW. Ted Turner promised them more money for less dates. And I remember Vince McMahon saying that Ted Turner was the devil, was evil for trying to put him out of business. And again, it's like, Vince, you did the same fucking thing. You did the same thing. Don't get mad at Ted Turner for using your own tactics against you. Well, he took a lot of talent, though. I'm not going to lie. He took everybody. He took, Randy Savage, Luger, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Hulk Hogan, Dusty Rhodes, Bobby the Brain Heenan, Rick Rude. Didn't he take Roddy Piper? Ric Flair went to WCW first, then went to WWF. But he got Ric Flair back, sure. And then, of course, we already know they started the Monday Night Roars. Eric Bischoff acts for 2 hours live on Monday nights. Killed WWE because they were not doing great television at all. They were very PG, but not just PG, but terrible PG. They had Medusa come in, who was a WWF worker. We know about the story of her taking the women's title to WCW and dropping it in the trash can on national television. And then Eric Bischoff will give away the results. To this day, even I'm like, okay, Eric, that was fucked up. I'm sorry. That's one of those things where you were already just kind of beating them in quality. You didn't need to give away the results. That's low. I don't even think Vince did. There's a certain low that Vince would go to. I don't even think Vince would go that low. I don't think he ever went that low. That was kind of fucked up of Eric Bischoff, but they were in business. They talked about the billionaire Ted skits and how they were mocking Ted Turner and how they were so controversial that the network pulled it. We don't talk about the billionaire Ted skits. They weren't even all that great. They weren't. But they were controversial for the time. And the network pulled it as a result. Yeah, the same network that allowed the Attitude Era. Make that one make sense. The billionaire Ted skits were too controversial, but then you see what they allowed on the Attitude Era. Now, I think it was a different, I don't know if it was a different owner or a different person in charge during that time in the late 90s than compared to the early 90s, but still, like, the billionaire Ted skits were too controversial for TV. But Brian Pillman pulling a gun out on Stone Cold Steve Austin wasn't. Make that one make sense. I don't get that. That was one of those, all right, sure, I guess. They talk about the curtain call. Again, so stupid. Because Diesel and Scott Hall were leaving the WCW. Shawn Michaels and Triple H wanted to give them a proper tribute, a proper send-off. It was not even taped. It was a house show. The good guys won. The bad guys embraced each other. They broke character. People were going crazy for it. The crowd popped for it. But because of this, it angered a lot of wrestlers. Undertaker, who lived his character. Bret Hart said it killed wrestling. We're not going to get into the feud between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. We'll be here all day. But essentially, the locker room was very upset about it, although Vince wasn't. Vince was like, okay, who cares? But the locker room was upset, and so Vince McMahon had to punish somebody. Can't punish Diesel. Can't punish Scott. Can't punish Shawn Michaels because he's the world champion. He punished Triple H. Which then led to Stone Cold Steve Austin winning the King of the Ring, and the rest is history. We know that part. But yeah, they talk about, is this where we talk about the NWO? Yep, they talk about Hulk Hogan turning heel, NWO killing WWF for 83 weeks straight. Crazy times to be watching wrestling at the time. But to be fair, because I've gone back and watched some of those WWF shows in the early 1990s. WWF in 95, 96 was garbage. I'm sorry. Other than Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker, WWF television 1995, 1996 was garbage. Horrible. Bastion Booger. Look it up. Bastion Booger. It was terrible. It was garbage. WWF didn't start getting better until 1997. I might even argue like late 1996 is when things started to pick up. That's when things started to get good. But for the most part, 1995 through a majority of 1996, bullshit. It was bad. Horrible. So you can imagine when they brought in the NWO, they did that awesome angle where it looked like WWF talent were coming in to take over WCW, which is how they presented it. It created excellent television. It was so much better. It was just a better product. But it wasn't because, they turned Hulk Hogan heel. It was because the product was just better. Now, having Hogan go heel was huge, by the way. Massive decision. At first, Hogan was against it, but then he realized, I can make a lot of money off of this, so besides, no one likes me right now. People are booing me, so I might as well go heel. Yeah, Bash at the Beach, 1996. That was crazy. I think after this is where they just kind of talk about the Montreal Screwjob, I think. Let me make sure I don't miss anything. Yeah, and then they get into the Montreal Screwjob. We all know about that. Bret Hart was leaving, going to WCW. He wouldn't give up the championship like Wendy Richter. And so Vince did exactly, full circle, what he did to Wendy, to Bret. Screwed him over because Bret wouldn't drop the title to Shawn Michaels, which was stupid. I'm sorry. Like, we talked about this before as well. Bret, it doesn't matter. You're leaving anyways. Who cares who you drop the belt to? You're leaving. Drop it to Shawn. Just drop it to Shawn. Why you give a fuck? I never got that. I hate him. Okay. You're not going to deal with him anyways. Just drop the belt. So I'm kind of in the corner with Vince and Triple H on this. Okay, he doesn't want to do business for him. Now, how they went about it was fucked up. I don't condone how they went about it, but I understand the sentiment of like, Brett, my dude, it's not that serious. Just give us the belt back, please. Thank you. But, you know, they had this idea of it going to a non-finish and then stripping Brett of the belt. What they did was what they did. Vince got punched, knocked out by Bret Hart as a result. And that was literally episode 3. Again, stuff we've heard before, but it was great. It was well produced. Episode 4 delves a bit deeper into the Attitude Era. For the most part, again, stuff we already know. But I do want to spend a little bit more time on this because this is where I grew up as a wrestling fan. So after the Montreal Screwjob, we all know about Vince McMahon becoming the main head, the main villain of this particular era. His character, the Mr. McMahon character, was inspired by old school wrestler Dr. Jerry Graham. Rich, flamboyant, highly unlikable, similar to what Vince McMahon literally was. Not just on screen, but also off screen. But he used the negative reaction from the Montreal Screwjob to build his persona. And what we got as a result, in my opinion, was the greatest heel in professional wrestling history. You will never find a bigger and better heel character than the Vince McMahon character. I will fight you on it. Name one heel and tell me he's better than Vince McMahon. You can't. You can't. Vince, to this day, is and forever will be the best heel persona ever. Ever in wrestling. He's just great at what he did. He knew how to push the buttons and make people want to see him get his ass kicked. And he made it fun to see him get his ass kicked. And look, will we get one guy that might get close to that one day? Probably. Dominic Mysterio's getting very close. But nah, even he wasn't as big of a heel as Vince McMahon was. That was undisputable, without question. So, around this time, we already know that WCW was kicking WWF's ass in the ratings, which pushed the WWF to change their entire product. They went to a more edgier TV-14 product, and thus the Attitude Era was born, which focused on more reality-based, risque content. We got DX, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Kane, Mankind. Oh my goodness, so many. Godfather, Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho. Oh, we'd be here all day. Jesus Christ. The Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys. Ladies and gentlemen, it literally was, in my opinion, the peak of WWF. Yes, more people watched in the 80s. But in terms of quality television, there isn't an era, and there will never be an era as good as the Attitude Era. I still to this day go back and watch those shows. I still watch those shows. Those 2-hour shows hit like candy. You be sitting there, you be watching it. It feels like 30 minutes go by, the show's over. They fly by. They are that good. And they were good because of the amount of storylines and characters that were fucking incredible. Case in point, the Vince McMahon versus Stone Cold Steve Austin storyline. That feud, greatest rivalry in history. My personal opinion. Greatest. That feud alone exploded WWE's popularity. WWF's popularity. They got so much attention. The ratings for WWF was so high, not making it up, they surpassed football. Football and even the World Series baseball games. They got more viewers than national football, than the NFL. Think about how much that is. Think about the average person that watches football. WWF got more viewers than that. They were huge back then. We talk about ECW's influence on the Attitude Era. Vince McMahon literally just ripped off ECW. A lot of the things that you saw in the Attitude Era on WWF television, they got from ECW. Paul Heyman played a huge part in that. And he's cool with it. Oh, Lord. Vince McMahon was asked how much of his real life character is connected to the TV persona. Vince McMahon, because he lives in his own world, had the balls to say, I am nothing like my TV persona. Excuse me? Excuse me, sir? The moment he said that, I called bullshit. I said, you fucking liar. You fucking liar. No one believes that. As soon as they cut to the wrestlers in this very same episode, asking the same question, every single one of them said, it's the exact same person. There is no difference. The only thing is the TV persona is turned up to 100. But it's the exact same person. It's literally the same person. Ain't no way in hell anyone believes that Vince McMahon, and I mean this, ain't no way in hell anyone believes there's a difference between the TV persona and this Vince McMahon. It's the exact same person. Get the fuck out of here with that. Get out of here with that. I believe even he knew he was bullshitting himself. But yeah, literally every other wrestler, from Stone Cold to Undertaker to Cody Rhodes to Triple H, they all said it's the exact same person. There ain't that much of a difference. It might be turned up to 100, but you're not going to fool anybody in thinking that you're different from your TV persona. But as we all know, there were a lot of controversies that came with the Attitude Era. Those of you who grew up during that time, you know there were a lot of kids watching WWF. And this is the other part that really threw me off. Because Vince McMahon literally made the statement, we talked about it earlier, that he feels Attitude Era WWF was family friendly. There was a standard deviation from the product, but it was a product for everybody. Again, I call bullshit. The main reason why it got popular is because it wasn't family friendly. It was the complete opposite. It was anti-culture. They literally did things they weren't supposed to do. And that's what made it fun to watch. You had Shawn Michaels humping the stage. He had sex with the stage. Literally. You had a man's penis get chopped off. You told women to get on their knees because it was a natural position. Come on, man. Who are you fooling? This ain't family friendly. I laughed my ass off when he said that. I'm like, you really are crazy. Vince really is out of his goddamn mind if he thought the Attitude Era was family friendly. That shit was so anti-cultural. Kids would go to school. I went to school one time. Personal story, real story. And I'm telling the truth. I got in trouble at my own school for doing the DX crotch chop. Suck it. I did that one time. The teacher's like, where'd you get that from? I didn't get sent to the principal's office, but I didn't get recess. I got in trouble for doing a DX crotch chop. And apparently I wasn't the only one. Who else here got in trouble back in the day because you watched WWF Attitude Era? Who was one of the people that got in trouble when they were in school? And the thing that really got them in trouble was the way they exploited the women. Oh, the amount of bra and panties and let's just say TNA, tits and ass, that was on this television got them a lot of criticism. You're appealing to kids? What? I call bullshit. But I'm not gonna lie, I was watching it as a kid and I probably shouldn't have been. When DX was telling women to flash, yes, Triple H was telling women to actually flash the television cameras. Yeah, that's not, again, family friendly? Women flashing their tits On camera, live TV. Weird. Weird shit, Vince. Weird shit. But we get to the damning part. The damning part of how do I put this? We get to, in my opinion, one of the biggest black marks on Vince McMahon. And I do blame him for this. I don't give a damn that Bret Hart forgave him. I blame him for this. Owen Hart. The death of Owen Hart. I never feel comfortable talking about this because I get sick to my stomach thinking about the very fact that all of this could have been avoided. All of this could have been avoided. Everyone sits here and says it was an accident. No, it wasn't. It could have been avoided. All of this was totally avoidable. I'll skim through what we already know. During this time, Owen Hart, even though Bret was no longer there in WCW, the stench of the Montreal Screwjob was still there. Owen is Bret's brother. And so Vince McMahon was using whatever little heat he still had with Bret to embarrass Owen. And they made Owen look like a joke. They did. Owen was embarrassed deliberately. And so they gave him this Blue Blazer character, superhero Blue Blazer, and he was scheduled to descend from the Raptors with a cable like he's a joke, like a superhero and shit. And look, it was designed to make him look like a fool. So we know what happened over the Edge 1999 during the video package or the promo of Owen Hart. He was supposed to descend down to the ring. While he was ascending, the cable broke. He fell to his death. Now the lights were off, so the fans didn't see it happen, but they heard a thud. I think they can use their imagination. The lights come on, there's paramedics inside the ring checking on Owen. He died immediately. He died in the ring, on impact. So, you would imagine that when someone dies, no matter what show it is, that's it. Go home. We'll give you a refund. Someone's dead. Show over. Vince McMahon said, nope, the show must go on. To this day, I hate that decision. I can't go back and watch Over the Edge. I remember seeing it one time as a kid. I saw it once as a kid. I never went back to watch it. I can't. Especially when you know that the blood on the mat, if you go and watch the WWE edited version of Over the Edge, I think it's still on Peacock. It was on the network. They don't edit that out. The blood on the mat is still there. So when you're watching the matches, you have to keep in mind, looking at that blood on the mat, that Owen died. And this show is still going on. The wrestlers themselves, a lot of them emotional, couldn't keep it together. This was not good. It was horrible. And of course, Vince blamed the manufacturing company. No, Vince, this is on you. Your negligence of making sure that this shit worked. You didn't. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna let this bullshit idea of, well, Vince didn't know, it's not his fault. It's all his fault. We wouldn't be in this situation if Vince had treated Owen more respectfully. If you didn't like Owen, you could have released him. You could have let him go to WCW with his brother. This didn't need to happen. It didn't need to happen. Bret forgives Vince. Good on him. I'm not. This was a prime example of pure negligence. Pure negligence. It's all on Vince's head. It's all on Vince. They didn't talk about the interviews he did as a result of this. They didn't touch on those. But I remember when, man, this is so bad. I remember when he was talking to one of the reporters during the Owen Hart interview, and they questioned him about the negligence. Vince McMahon looked at that man and said, "I don't like your tone." You son of a bitch. You. Again, Vince McMahon, in my personal opinion, without a shadow of a doubt, is one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, we are here today as wrestling fans. I'm not going to hide from that, run from that, but it's situations like this that really just make me go, I wish you would have went to jail. I really wish you would have gotten your comeuppance, because you are a fucking scumbag. Seriously. I just hate the fact that he never takes accountability. He never takes accountability. When shit is actually his fault, he just never takes accountability. How can anyone defend this man? I'm telling you.
Mr. McMahon, in my opinion, is the most underrated heel.
I'm sorry? Are you talking about it in real life? Then yes, I agree. I'm sorry. I can't not blame Vince for this. And I'll keep saying it. It didn't need to happen. You didn't need to book the way you booked Owen. You didn't need to put him in that stupid ass get up. Have him drop from the ceiling the Raptors to begin with. And even if you were going to do it, you could have checked the equipment beforehand. You didn't, because you didn't give a fuck about Owen. He checked the equipment for Shawn Michaels when Shawn Michaels zipped down from the Raptors at WrestleMania 12, right? WrestleMania 12. He didn't do it for Owen. It was stupid. Episode 5. So we're starting to close down the documentary with the last 2 episodes. This one was about his family and the family business. And those of you who are aware of the heat between Shane McMahon and Vince McMahon, this was the focal point of it. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't really know much about Shane's part of the family. Because let's just be real. I think Shane McMahon is a great athlete, a great on-screen performer. I really don't know what he does behind scenes. Because we know Stephanie McMahon is like the female version of Vince. She's the businesswoman. Literally taking everything she learned from what Vince did and becoming literally co-chairwoman at one point in WWE. So we kind of know what Stephanie's role is, or what Stephanie's role was, her role was when she was there. With Shane, there was always this idea that Shane would take over when Vince stepped down. And we thought that made the most sense. We're like, well, yeah, I would think if Shane's shadowing you and literally helps you out and has been around since the beginning of time, that would make the most sense. Vince steps down, Shane takes over. Never happened. It literally never happened. And we're all just like, why though? Why not Shane? Why wasn't he never given an opportunity? To this day, I'm still just like... Now, we'll talk about certain instances where Shane had questionable visions about wrestling, but at the same time, I'm still one of those people that's like, well, maybe it could have worked. We don't know. They open the episode, again, rehashing Vince McMahon's childhood trauma. First 12 years, he was abused, sexually abused by his mom, and physically abused by his stepdad. And Paul Heyman says, rather than the becoming and abusing himself, Vince used his trauma as fuel to control his destiny and make himself untouchable in the business world. Like I said, when you grow up in an environment like that, it makes you, it basically makes you made of Teflon. You become made of Teflon as a result. Because if you deal with that and you survive it, you can handle anything. They talk about Stephanie and Shane. We know about this. They grew up under Vince, learning the ropes as both performers and executives under his father's tutelage under Vince McMahon. We know about the dynamic between Shane and Triple H. This is not new. We know Shane does not like Triple H. Don't think he ever liked him. I remember that interview he did with Mick Foley, when Mick Foley asked him, how do you feel about Triple H? And Shane said, he is my sister's husband. This is not new. But yeah, there's always been this contentious relationship between Shane and Triple H. Shane was strongly against Triple H marrying Stephanie. To this day, he still hates the fact that Triple H married Stephanie. And I will say this, okay, when it first happened, I understand. Bro, we're 24 years past that. Get over it. 24 years later, get over it. The kids, their kids, Triple H and Stephanie McMahon's kids are in college now. Get over it.
Don't forget DX mocking the Nation of Domination.
Don't get me started. Again, we already talked about it with episode 4 when Vince McMahon said this was family friendly. No, it wasn't. How can you say that? Especially after all that bullshit. I'm sorry. But anyways, Vince clearly favored Stephanie over Shane. That was clear. He clearly loved her more than Shane. Why? I don't know. Such a weird dynamic between Shane and Vince. They didn't really delve into that enough, and I wish they would have. That was actually the main thing that I wish I would have gotten more context on. The relationship between Shane and Vince. And you can connect the dots. Maybe it's related to Vince's relationship with his father, because they didn't have the best relationship either. And so him and Shane probably have that same kind of relationship, and it would be expected, but still, why though? I still want to know why. But they touch on Linda McMahon playing a key role, how she wasn't great on camera, but she was amazing at business. We talk about, oh Lord, oh God, forgot about all this shit. So when Stephanie and Triple H were getting married, Vince McMahon wanted to put it on pay-per-view. Like, literally put their real life marriage on pay-per-view. And Stephanie and Triple H said, no, we're not doing that. Now that's tame. Compared to Katie Vick, and then the one that never aired. Let's talk about it. So, Vince McMahon proposed, and I'm not making this up, Vince McMahon actually proposed that he would be the father of Stephanie's child. Vince McMahon wanted to do an incest storyline with his own daughter. I'm sorry, what? What? Pause! Wait a minute! I'm very much aware that this isn't a new story either. I'm pretty sure some of you know about it. But can we just stop for a second and seriously delve into how fucked up this is? And then you wonder why people like me 100% believe he did the things that they accuse him of. He totally 1000% did those things to Janelle Grant, to Rita Chatterton. When you hear shit like this, what sane individual, and I mean this, what sane individual would even suggest the idea of being the father of his daughter's child. I need to drink on that. No, sir. No, sir. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. They just touched on it, too. Just touched on it and just said, he's just crazy. Come on, man. Y'all let this man just skirt by some of the wildest shit. I thought the comment that he said about Rita Chatterton, I mean, although if it was rape, then it's past the statute of limitations. You would think that that would be like oh no, this guy is crazy, stay away from him. But then this pitch, you would think that this would be it. This would have been like, oh, fuck this guy. You know what I mean?
I found out on the news while living 40 minutes away.
I couldn't. I can't, y'all. I can't. That was one of those things where I'm just like, y'all really think this guy is normal? Like, how the fuck can anybody work with him and not think he's a raving fucking lunatic? We know about the controversy with him and Trish Stratus. Yeah, the way Vince treated females, I think that's also an indication that, again, he did half the shit he was accused of. I will say this. As much as we talk about him mistreating females, bra and panties, and exploiting them, the stuff he did with Trish Stratus gets, and I say this as someone who respects women who, I hate when people do that. I respect women, but no, seriously, like, I'm all about equal opportunity and respecting women's boundaries, right? But the stuff they did with Trish about her barking like a dog, I think it's hilarious. It's hilarious from the standpoint of, this is so fucked up even for this time. And it's fucked up to the point where it's entertaining. Remember that segment when he was making Trish bark? Like, yes, you do. Most of you do. Some of you were there when it happened. The fans were cheering. When Vince told her to get on the ground and crawl and bark like a dog, and told her to get naked and take her bra off, that was to get him heat. The fans cheered it. I'm sorry. Like, that is wild to me. Like, we look back on this now and go, yo, you can't do that again. You're not doing that. You're not doing that in WWE. No one's doing that, right? But the fact that when it happened back then, not only was it aired, but when it was aired, fans were cheering it. It's like we live in a completely different era now. There's no way that would have happened. Let him do that nowadays. Oh Lord. Oh, they would have thrown WWE off the air. Half of the shit they did back then. Someone brought up the Nation of Domination, DX mocking the Nation of Domination with blackface. Oh, no, sir. Oh, they would have tossed them off the air immediately. The shit they got away with. And that's why I think when people say bring back the Attitude Era, you gotta be careful what you wish for, buddy. You better be careful what you wish for, because if you bring this shit back, oof. Yeah, that was wild, but I was cool with it because it was part of the story to get people to hate Vince. He misused and abused Trish. She turned on him at WrestleMania 17. And of course, Linda McMahon got her comeuppance. I wasn't that upset about it as many people were. I just thought it was part of the storyline. I was just more entertained at the fact that this was so fucked up, and yet, fans loved it. People are telling me I didn't talk about Mike Tyson. Look, guys, God damn it. Please. If I sit here and cover all of the crazy shit, yes, Mike Tyson, when they brought him into WWF, was accused of rape, too. Yeah, I know. But damn it, y'all. Can we just Can we not uncover all of this shit? Like I said before, I'm telling y'all, they could have gotten a lot darker with this They could have gotten a lot more darker with this docuseries. A lot more darker. But they didn't. Oh, we're not done. We got more to talk about. So, they did talk about Vince McMahon's affair with Linda McMahon. This was brought up. And again, if you've watched wrestling for a long time like me, this is not new to you. He did an interview with, I think, Playboy, where he admitted he's had multiple affairs. He cheated on his wife with Linda. He cheated with Linda. No, he cheated on Linda. He didn't cheat with Linda. I phrased that wrong. He cheated on Linda while he was married to her. Multiple times. Some of you are going to go, that scumbag. Yeah. Let me just say this. Out of all the things that Vince has done, this is tame. This is tame. This doesn't surprise me one bit. Not even from the standpoint that it's Vince doing it. Celebrity culture. Hollywood celebrity culture as a whole is all about infidelity. I'm sorry. The odds of you getting a Hollywood couple that remains a couple, they don't cheat or don't break up because of someone cheating or something, is rare. Rare. It's 1 out of shit. Good luck. 1 in a million. I'm sorry. The odds of that being the case is rare. Are there some where Hollywood couples, celebrities, they get together, they have an honest, monogamous relationship, and they live happily ever after? Yes. I'm pretty sure you can find one. But for the most part, they cheat on each other, lots of scandals, they break up, or they get into open relationships or become swingers. When you're a millionaire, billionaire, and you know you can have any man and any woman you want, there's no way you can be loyal to one person. Nick Cannon, prime example. How many women does he have? 6 women? 13, 12 kids? So, yes, Vince is a scumbag for cheating on Linda. At the same time, I'm not surprised, and it's the tamest aspect of him being a douchebag. Sue me. Oh, I love this story. Sable. Who here remembers Sable? Yeah, Sable, the girl that at one point was the most popular female. I'll even say this. I think during the Attitude Era, she was number 2. It was Stone Cold Steve Austin, then it was Sable. Those two got the highest ratings out of anybody during that time. Stone Cold Steve Austin, then Sable. And you know why Sable was very popular. Sable knew what she was doing. Sable knew exactly why men and women loved her. And I do say men and women. She wasn't afraid to show it off. All about sex appeal. Although she could wrestle. She could wrestle, though. She knew what she needed to do to get people to love her. Show her tits. And she was great at that. Well, Sable and WWE have what's called a strenuous relationship. Contentious, if you will. Because Sable, I think in the early 2000s, sued WWF. She sued them for exploiting her and degrading her. And sexual assault and sexual harassment, I think. I think it was sexual harassment, to be exact. Yeah. Sexual harassment. $110 million. She sued them for $110 million for exploiting her and making her do things she didn't want to do. Now, usually, I would be in Sable's corner. Because the one thing that she has a point over is this idea that Vince would make women do things they didn't want to do. And Vince made a habit out of that, not just on screen, but also off screen. Forcing women into situations they just don't want to be in. See, here's the thing, men. When it comes to women, if you meet a woman that doesn't mind showing you her tits, or doesn't mind being sexual and, you know, allowing her sex appeal to make her money, Sonny, Tori Wilson, Stacy Keibler, you know, you tell them to go out there, show their tits, they're fine with it. It's not sexual harassment. When it becomes sexual harassment is when you make women who don't want to do it. And so you're asking, like, well, how do I avoid it? How do I avoid the situation? Don't force women to do things they don't want to do, Vince. And so Sable, if she had stuck with this lawsuit, I would be behind her. Here's the thing. Sable dropped the lawsuit because she needed money and just went back to WWE. So it's like, God damn it, Sable. You're enabling his behavior. You had him. She had him because he would do this shit to women. He would do this to women. He would force them in situations. We'll talk about Ashley Mazzaro. We will talk about her. But Sable's like, you know what? Screw it. I lied. Forget about it. It wasn't sexual assault. Hire me, Vince. I need that money. Jesus Christ. To this day, if you're wondering why Sable isn't in the Hall of Fame, because some of you are like, I thought Sable was very popular. Why is she in the Hall of Fame? Sable isn't in the Hall of Fame because she tried to sue WWE. $110 million. And as long as Stephanie McMahon has any say in who goes into the Hall of Fame, Sable will never touch the Hall of Fame. To this day, Stephanie hates Sable. Because she tried to sue her father. And then she said, never mind. Give me a job. I do have to wonder, though. Who does Stephanie hate more? Chyna or Sable? That's a question for the people. Who does Stephanie hate more? Chyna or Sable? They didn't talk about Chyna. They could have. But I think we all know why. We bobbing like, oh my girls got blue,
and Sable played Vince's mistress back in 2003 on SD.
He sure did. He sure did have Sable come and be his mistress after she sued him. But yeah, live chat, let me know who you think Stephanie hates more, Chyna or Sable. Get that debate going. Let's see what else we got here. So we know the WWE goes public. This is stuff we know. WWE goes public in 2000, which means they could expand their brand internationally. They had their own restaurant. They started the XFL. Oh, that was a terrible idea. God damn did that bomb. Again, it's like the World Bodybuilding Federation. Vince just doesn't do anything good unless it's wrestling. The XFL was destined to bomb. Because when you watch it, because I remember watching some of it when it actually aired, the games sucked. They sucked ass. These athletes were not good at football. It was just terrible football. They said the show was so bad that it got the lowest, and I'm not making this up, it got the lowest ratings in Nielsen television history. Think about how bad it is when you break records with the Nielsen ratings. Horrible. It had one season and it was over. We never saw it again. That was one of those ventures you're like, Vince, stick to wrestling, please. Please stick to wrestling. You suck at this. You suck at making movies. No Holds Barred was garbage. You suck at, clearly, football. Bodybuilding Federation. You suck, Vince. Just stick to wrestling. Just stick to wrestling, my friend. We know he bought WCW and did the Monday Night Wars. Oh, the name change. Oh, we didn't need to go to this one, but I'm kind of glad they did. So we all know that the WWF had to change their name to WWE in 2002. Because the World Wildlife Fund sued them for it. They sued them for the name. Why? Because marketing. Those sons of bitches tried to cash in on WWF's marketing. They knew what they was doing. But they had it longer. They had a case in court. The World Wildlife Fund actually did have WWF longer than WWF did. Because before WWF became a thing, it was WWF. And then when Vince took over, it became WWF. So there was a conflict of interest, but no one said anything. They were cool with it because it was just wrestling, right? It was just wrestling. But then WWF became a world-renowned phenomenon. Now they're like, yeah, about that name, we're going to need that back. Thanks. It's bullshit. I still hate it to this day. I still fucking hate it. But they became WWE, and a lot of people were like, oh, so they're not cool anymore because they changed their name. No. It had nothing to do with that. They were sued, and they lost in court. We know about Hulk Hogan coming back, but we also know about Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock leaving around this time. So Stone Cold Steve Austin wasn't a fan of the creative direction of WWF at the time. And we know he took his ball and went home. He did come back, but he wasn't the same. Not even like months after he had that match with The Rock, he called it a day. He couldn't wrestle anymore. He was just broken down. Now, he did wrestle again. WrestleMania 38 against Kevin Owens. But ultimately, the Stone Cold Steve Austin that we knew of, he had his last match at WrestleMania 19 against The Rock. So, in a span of, what was that, 4 or 5 years, they lose The Rock to Hollywood, and they lose Stone Cold Steve Austin, which brought in the Ruthless Aggression era. We know about this. They're looking for another top guy. Who answers the call? Ruthless Aggression. John Cena. We know about John Cena. He was the last megastar they created. They didn't really talk much about his relationship with Vince, which, again, if they did, it would have made this situation even darker, because Cena and Vince got into some shady shit. But, yeah, we know about Cena being the top guy for like 15 years, I think. After Stone Cold and The Rock left. They talk about bringing back Bret Hart. Eric Bischoff came in. All of Vince's enemies, he bought them out as a way of control. But then the documentary, the episode, ends with Shane and Vince having a falling out. And we know about this, I think. Most of us know about how Shane McMahon, we thought he was the heir apparent. We thought he was going to take over WWE, WWF when Vince stepped down. We literally thought it was going to be his company. I can't be the only one that thought that. Well, come to find out that Vince didn't want to give it to him. There's a crazy story that Paul Heyman told. Paul Heyman told this story that Vince McMahon and Shane had a massive backstage fight over a creative decision. And Shane said, you need to change this. This is stupid. This isn't going to work. Vince grabbed a knife, gave it to Shane, opened up his suit and said, right here. He essentially dared Shane to kill him if he wanted control of the company. Because I'm not going to give it to you. You're going to have to fight it. You're going to have to fight me for it. Or buy me out, like I did my dad. Their relationship took a downturn. And Shane left. He would come back in 2016, but that's why he left the company. Because he knew he wasn't in the cards. They were not going to let him take over the company. Which was crazy. To this day, I do not understand why Shane never got the attention that Stephanie got. And that was never explored. I mean, Shane McMahon had the eye to see that UFC was going to blow up. They touched on it in the documentary. Before Dana White took over UFC and it became a publicly traded company too, and then it blew up. Shane McMahon had his eyes on UFC, and he asked Vince McMahon, yo, Vince, Dad, let me go buy this. And Vince said no. They missed out. They missed out, man. And I would have wondered what that would have looked like. Because you know Shane McMahon, he has a thing about real life fighting. Like, he likes martial arts. He loves that shit. And he feels like WWE should become more like that. We can sit here and question that vision if that worked. But here's my thing. Whether you agree or disagree with the vision or not, you don't know if it'll work unless he tries. Like, the only aspect of UFC real life fighting that we got with the WWE was, what was it? Raw Underground? Raw Underground, right? Yeah, that didn't work out too well. And then, what was that called? A Brawl for All. The boxing. Oh, we didn't talk about it. That's another thing. I'm telling you, if they would have covered more than they did, Brawl for All was nuts. Horrible. But yeah, like, when WWE tried to do real life fighting, it didn't really work out. And so you can use those aspects to go, maybe Vince's vision works better than Shane McMahon's vision. But we really don't know. If we gave him the keys to the castle and just let him run with it, then we'll see if he's good at it or not. He probably sucks at it, but we don't know. And that's my thing with Shane McMahon. They gave the keys to the castle to Triple H and Stephanie. We know how they operate. Paul Heyman was a lead writer for SmackDown at one point. But we know Paul Heyman because he ran ECW. They never gave Shane a shot at anything. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. I feel bad for Shane. He at least deserves an opportunity. But if I'm being honest with you, Vince treated Shane the same way Vince's stepfather treated Vince. That's all he knows. I'm telling you, he's a screwed up man. The final episode. So the last episode does touch on a couple of things that, let's just be honest, kind of felt like, all right, we didn't really need to cover this stuff, but I guess it's important. They touched on Vince's feud with Donald Trump. Oh yeah, the WrestleMania 33 hair versus hair billionaire feud. Oh, Jesus Christ. I do like the fact that the documentary touched on Donald Trump using a lot of wrestling terms and wrestling isms in the political world, saying things to get an emotion out of you, lying on purpose to make people react a certain way. For me, the best compliment that I can give Donald Trump is that he is a wrestling character in real life. Donald Trump fits like a glove in WWE. He does. He fits like a glove in WWE. And so a lot of the things that you see him do on the political trail, he got that from wrestling. And it works. Clearly it worked. He became president. Jesus Christ. They talk about, what was it? Undertaker's streak? Yeah, Undertaker's streak ending. Again, Vince McMahon decision. To this day, I still don't think it should have happened. But it is what it is. You can't go back and change it. The Women's Revolution, or Evolution, which was more Stephanie McMahon than Vince, but they gave him credit for letting it happen. Okay. But those are just tidbits. The main things that were the main focus of this episode were two incidents, and you know what those two incidents was. The death of Chris Benoit, which led to WWE going PG, which killed the business, which literally ran off tons and tons and tons of fans. And then the scandal with Janelle Grant. And those were like the main focuses of the entire episode. And they didn't hold back. They didn't hold back on the Chris Benoit scandal. This was wild. So we all know what happened with Chris Benoit. The suicide, double homicide, suicide ending to his life. One of the greatest wrestlers to ever do it. But people just can't look at him the same because of what happened. They talked about CTE. Here we go. Christopher Nowinski, who was a wrestler, got into neurosurgeon. I forgot what the actual term was, but he got into that aspect of the medical industry, neurosurgery and stuff like that. There's an actual term for it. I can't remember what it was. But he was about looking at people's brains. And he suggested that Chris Benoit committed these horrible actions because he had what was called CTE. And I think this is something that was discussed not just in wrestling, this was discussed in football as well. How having CTE can rot your brain and make you do things that are out of character. They said Chris Benoit had the brain of a 94-year-old man. And how old was he? Like in his 40s? It was really bad. And they showed autopsies about it as well. They showed that he was not in his right mind. And so they used that to say he made these acts. He did these acts because of all the trauma that was brought upon him in wrestling. The steel chair shots to the head, the diving headbutts. And the media got a hold of this. And they ran wrestling down. During this time period, yeah, it was bad for WWE. It was really bad. And it came at a time where it was already kind of weird because Vince McMahon killed himself off. He killed himself off, literally. He killed off his TV character. And then he had to kill the storyline because of Chris Benoit passing away. There was a section in this particular episode where Stone Cold Steve Austin was asked about CTE. Stone Cold Steve Austin literally said, if you get concussions in wrestling, that means you're not good at your job. He doesn't believe in CTE. He doesn't think it's real. He believes Chris Benoit killed those people because he was just an evil bastard. I love Stone Cold Steve Austin, but he's whack for that. You can't disprove what is in your face. CTE, for the record, ladies and gentlemen, is very real. And it is scientifically proven that people with CTE do get violent and do commit murders. It has happened before. It's been scientifically proven. So to hear Stone Cold Steve Austin say that, again, it just lets you know how some of these wrestlers are just so loyal to the business. Undertaker has had 18 surgeries. Hulk Hogan has had 26 surgeries. These men and women, but these people, they deal with pain on a regular basis. So much so, they don't even know if it's necessarily wrong to be in this amount of pain. When the same person would tell them, yes, it's wrong. Any sane person will let them know, no, it's not okay to be in that kind of pain every single day of your life. And when you deal with that much trauma to your brain and it rots your brain, it is expected you don't start thinking right. Vince McMahon argues that Chris just snapped. He's a human being and we're all subjected to snapping. We all have a bad day. And all it takes is one bad day. No, that's not what this is. Scientifically proven CTE shows you Chris Benoit was not in his right mind. And he took the lives of his family while also taking his own life. Sorry. It was a dumb take. I love Austin. And I respect everything that he's done. But to say CTE doesn't exist because you got a concussion one time or you dealt with concussions all your life, I disagree with that. Sorry. And that's Austin. Austin's like, in my opinion, he's number one. You ask me who's the greatest wrestler of all time in terms of in-ring ability, stature, star power, it's Steve Austin. Sorry, Austin. Nah. Not with you on that one, buddy. They talk about Vince McMahon doing an interview with Armin. Forgot his last name. I forgot, but it was a guy named Armin. And he was asking him about, do you hold yourself responsible for the death of these wrestlers? And he would push Vince. And of course, Vince got very aggressive. He got very aggressive because he was being blamed for these wrestlers dying before the age of 45, which again is not his fault. Vince can be blamed for a lot of shit. That's not his fault. Could Vince give them a lighter schedule? Yes, but look here. I've heard so many stories of Vince McMahon paying for people's surgeries, telling people to take weeks off, giving them vacations off when they feel overworked. So that's one thing you can't say about Vince. That's one thing about Vince. He cared about the talents, especially the ones that made him money. Not everybody, but he cared about talent. So to blame him for wrestlers dying early, that's just the nature of the business. That's not Vince. Although Vince getting aggressive with the interviewer was kind of much. That wasn't smart. But yeah, that Chris Benoit incident forced the WWE to go PG. They got rid of steel chair shots to the head, which I'm on the fence about. I'm one of the main people that believe that's just a staple of wrestling. If you do it right and it's used sparingly, steel chair shots to the head is just what makes wrestling wrestling. Sue me. Yes, head trauma and all that kind of stuff. I just talked about CTE. But if you don't do it all the time, then you're good. But that's one of those things where it's like, you want wrestling to feel like it's violent and not everybody can do it. That's one of those hallmarks that make you go, yeah, I'm not doing wrestling and getting hit in the head with a steel chair. When you think about getting hit in the head with a steel chair, you think about wrestling, right? I'm just saying. They got rid of pile drivers. Anything that had to do with your head hitting the mat, they got rid of it. They watered down the product. They went PG. And from a business standpoint, you understand. Because it got them sponsors and it got them away from Chris Benoit. At the end of the day, it killed the business. WWE going PG, in my opinion, gave us some of the worst television that WWE WWF has ever produced. It was a very horrible, horrific time to be a wrestling fan. Terrible. I'm shocked I'm still a fan. To this day, I'm like, how did I survive this bullshit? It was bad. And earlier, when I was mentioning, I really wish they would have delved more into this. What I was talking about was the PG era. I really, really wish they would have delved deep into the content that came out of this era. And they really delved deep into how out of touch Vince McMahon was. Because the shit that we got from this era was inexcusable. The writing was garbage. Someone just said, well, it's not PG, it's the writing. They can't write PG. Wrestling doesn't work with PG. It doesn't. Well, what about NXT? Okay, sure. NXT still did some shit that you weren't supposed to do. I'm just saying. Triple H did break some PG rules with that. But at the same time, I don't think wrestling works with PG. I mean, look at WWE now. They're transitioning back to a much more adult TV-14 product with blood involved, with them cussing. I'm sorry, PG doesn't mix with wrestling. It just doesn't. There are certain things that you need for wrestling to feel like wrestling. Steel chair shots. And then, of course, blood. And then a TV-14 product. Do I think they should go Attitude Era TV-14? Listen, pushing the envelope is important, but there are some lines you shouldn't cross, and they crossed a lot of lines in the Attitude Era, even for me. Some of it is so fucked up, it's like, goddamn, how did we get away with this? Even for that time, it was fucked up, but that's what made it popular, because it was so anti-culture. It was so anti-culture. Don't think that would work nowadays. And then we end this lovely series with the controversy surrounding Vince retiring, and then the scandal with Janelle Grant. So, when Vince initially retired in 2022, and this was after his interview, they didn't bring him back to be interviewed for the scandals, because around this time, Vince was embroiled with some issues, and you all know what happened when it came out that he paid women hush money to keep some scandals under the table, NDAs, the company looked into it and they found out what they were about and they instantly voted him off. They said, you can't be here no more. The board unanimously, Triple H and Stephanie, who are his children, son-in-law and daughter, was on that board and they voted him off. They voted him off. What they saw in those documents, we only know about Janelle Grant and Rita Chatterton. We don't know about the other two women. They saw all of it. It was so bad, and they knew if it got out, it would kill the company. They said, you got to go. Vince, you got to go. And so, what was ironic is he made mention that anyone who retires loses respect for him. Why would you want to retire? Why would you want to stop growing? I have no respect for anyone who retires. That's what Vince said. Vince said he doesn't respect anybody who retires. And then he retired. The irony of it. The irony of him saying that for him to, the very next year, because this was filmed in 2021, the very next year for him to retire. Insane. I just thought that was hilarious. So you hate yourself, Vince? Is that what you're saying? Probably. He probably does hate himself. Shit. It was short-lived. Yes, Stephanie McMahon took over as co-chairwoman and Triple H took over creative. But we know what happens. Vince bullies his way back in because he has a majority vote. He changes the board. He sells Endeavor to Ari Emanuel and gets the executive chairman position where he oversaw basically everything, WWE and UFC. And we're thinking, well, shit, we're stuck with him. Right? Nope. The Janelle Grant situation came out. And the dumbest thing Vince could have ever done was sell it to a bigger person, was to sell. Because that means he no longer owns a majority of the shares. Now, if he has to leave, he can't come back. And so when the Janelle Grant situation hit, and you hear the craziness with that, we're not going to get into it. We know about the text messages, the defecation on her forehead, sex trafficking her, threatening to R-word her, rape her. We know about it. We know about it. They got rid of him immediately. And I thought it was funny when Vince first bullied his way back in, Stephanie retired. Stephanie left when Vince came in. The moment Vince stepped down, Stephanie came right back into the fold. Now she's on every show. I didn't see Stephanie a lick of the time when Vince McMahon came back. When Vince came back as executive chairman, I never saw Stephanie. The moment he got dropped, she popped her head back up. Hilarious. I love it. I love that she popped her head back up. They quickly delved into Ashley Mazzaro, which, again, that's a situation that should have gotten a lot more coverage. What happened to Ashley was inexcusable. Ashley Mazzaro was a female wrestler, Diva Search winner, who unfortunately took her own life due to a series of scandals and having her career taken away from her. So we know about the stuff with Ashley and her getting sexually assaulted by one of the doctors overseas. During one of the Tribute of the Troops shows, she got assaulted. And like a lot of things, Vince McMahon and the WWE tried to cover it up. They tried to cover it up. But it gets worse than that. Vince McMahon also assaulted Ashley Mazzaro. He assaulted her. He came onto her sexually. He made sexual advances towards her. And she turned him down. She turned him down. She said no. Which was the death knell in her career. Because Vince McMahon would then start booking her to look like a joke. Because she literally denied his sexual advances. And what ended up happening is that he would just book her like shit. Horrible. Horrible. Her dream job. Her dream job. She had no one to turn to, which would lead to her untimely death She killed herself, man. She took her own life. That's horrible. That's horrible, man. Again, this one's on Vince. That one's on Vince. That's horrible. It makes my stomach turn. And so when I think about everything that happened with Ashley Mazzaro, Rita Chatterton, we didn't even talk about the tanning the tanning lady when he went to a tanning salon and he assaulted her. I don't know about that story all that much. They said it and then they didn't delve into it. I wish they would have. But when you hear all these stories and you know how crazy he is, how could you not believe? How could you not believe he didn't do it? Here's how I know that Vince did it. This is the biggest giveaway. All those other scandals, the steroid trial, the freaking Ring Boy scandal, the shit with, oh my goodness, we'd be here. Owen Hart, Chris Benoit. Vince fought back. He at least fought back on those. When this came out, Vince didn't fight back. Ain't that funny? When all this shit came out about the women hush NDAs, hush money payments, he didn't fight back on it. He retired. He ran away from it. The main reason he wanted to cut this documentary, buy it and then cut it, was to not let this get out. The hush money payments. Why are you running from this, Vince? Why are you running from it? Because you did it. That's the only reason why. The federal government is investigating him. The federal government, the feds, are investigating Vince McMahon for this. He's in trouble. And I do expect him to go to jail. He's going to jail. Couldn't have happened to a nicer man. The final question of the documentary was the interviewers asking, what do you think is Vince McMahon's legacy? Which was awkward as fuck. Because they asked all the wrestlers, and the wrestlers were like, we don't know, actually. We don't know what his legacy is. I'm like, really, y'all? His legacy is exactly what Tony Atlas said. The greatest promoter of all time. The wrestling business, WWE would not be where it is today if Vince didn't do what he did. If Vince McMahon didn't exist. Period. End of story. End of story. That's his legacy. At the same time, he's also a sexual deviant. An evil sex deviant that forces himself on women and doesn't show them any respect because he grew up in a abusive household at a young age and quite frankly ended up becoming an abuser himself. That's usually how it works, right? People who are abusers were abused. Not all of them. You could make a choice to not be abused. He chose to be the abuser. So, again, I think overall, when it comes to this documentary, I thought it was well produced. I think in terms of, if you ask me what is the best WWE overall documentary, this is one of the best ones I've seen. In terms of a Vince McMahon documentary, I also thought it was great. No, it didn't talk about a lot new. It didn't bring anything new to the table. It didn't delve into some aspects that I really thought they should have delved into. They let a lot of things slide. I'm telling you, this could have been a lot darker. So much more darker than it was. But it's still a great documentary. I do recommend you watch it, if you haven't. And yeah, I think the purpose was to expose Vince McMahon. They did that. This is an absolutely damning documentary. So, that's my thoughts. We're going to quickly get the thoughts of the people in the live chat. Give me your grades. Give me your scores. If you've seen it, let me know how you feel about it. I want to know your thoughts and what stood out to you the most when it comes to this documentary. Let's have a conversation, man. Let me see what you guys felt about it. What were your thoughts about the documentary? And to you, What was the most damning aspect about it? YouTube member Xavier Jackson says, I agree with everything except I don't see Vince going to jail or spending one day in jail. Look here. Diddy's going to jail. If Diddy's going to jail, Vince is going to jail. Vince is a scumbag, Diddy's worse. Both of them are being investigated by the feds. Vince is going to jail. Do I think Vince and Diddy were involved? Where Vince, people want to ask me if Vince was involved with Diddy. He did go to one of his parties, Diddy's parties, so maybe, perhaps. Let's see here. Yeah, people did get in trouble. They said they got in trouble, but they said it was worth it. Oh, they did get in trouble with the Cashapp, the same thing. That's funny. Yeah, not a lot of people were happy about the Owen Hart situation. Oh, the Austin 316 t-shirt. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that got people in trouble as well. Vince is seriously the greatest heel on the planet. Period. He's the greatest heel ever. Greatest heel in professional wrestling and greatest heel in real life. Although Diddy might actually top him. We'll figure that one out. Donald Trump and Diddy are up there, though. But in terms of, both wrestling and real life, yeah, he's number one. Lauren Biggs, your goatness, says, I don't feel sorry for Vince's childhood. That's not an excuse. Change your future. Don't become what you were dealing with, essentially. I agree. Don't become what you hated. Shane never liked Triple H to begin with. He never liked Triple H. Never liked him. Especially doesn't like him now that he married his sister. Yeah, I'm sorry. Vince trying to be the father of Stephanie McMahon's son. It's like, hello? What are we doing here? What are we doing here? That's crazy. He's a psychopath. And that's why when people say Vince didn't do it, I'm like, are you fucking serious? The same man that went to do a storyline where he is the father of his daughters. I'm sorry.
Don't forget what Bruce said at the end of the doc. He defended Vince, and that interview was done in January of this year. Yeah, still a Vince stooge.
There's a reason why I'm avoiding Bruce Pritchard. On purpose. I don't want to give him the light of day. Bruce Pritchard makes me sick. He does. The ultimate stooge. Because he says something about Vince McMahon paid for his wife's surgery. And so he will constantly always be loyal to him. And that's fine. But no, I'm sorry. That's some bullshit. Just because he was great to you doesn't mean he's absolved of all of his wrongdoings. That's not how that works. That's not how life works. Do I remember Vince trying to sleep with Tori and Stacy? Yeah. Oh, he tried to sleep with a lot of women. Candice Michelle, Sable, Tori, Stacy. Who was the other mistress? Trish. There was another mistress. There was one more. There was one more mistress. Who was it? Y'all let me know. I remember them all. Oh, I asked you guys, who does Stephanie hate more? Let's see what you guys say. Because I said, who she hate more, Chyna or Sable? Y'all say Chyna. Chyna, Chyna, Chyna. New Japan Pro Wrestling Girl says both. I don't know. I would probably go with Chyna because of her relationship with Triple H, so she probably hates her more. But no, because Chyna's in the Hall of Fame. So she really can't hate her that much because Chyna's in there. So yeah, maybe Sable. Maybe at one point Chyna, but yeah, Sable, for sure. Sable. I believe they're also say as long as they don't mention say WWF, they constantly say it 15 times. Yeah, them losing WWF was wild, bro. It was wild. Yeah, they didn't talk about Brawl for All. That blew me for a loop. They could have. Alright. Firestar Heart says this was a very good docuseries. It's damned Vince on a whole lot. I've had an inner hatred for Vince ever since Owen. I'll be talking more about this series during my live stream. Oh shit, cool. Join his live stream, ladies and gentlemen. Otto, is it Scudder? Otto Scudder gave it a B+. Left a lot to still uncover with Vince, but I like how Netflix put a focus on the dark side of Vince. Yeah, they covered everything that they should have covered. I agree. John Bill II says, I got into an argument with somebody on the YouTube comments comparing Vince to Tony Khan. Don't do that. Don't do that. Tony's far better. Tony's far better than Vince. He's a lunatic too, but a lunatic in a good way. Maybe not for television quality, but he's not nowhere near the raging psychopath that Vince McMahon is. Lauren Biggs, loves Stone Cold, but he's a woman beater. Oh, shit. Let's not get into that, please. Let's see here. I think I got a good gist of what people are saying. So for the most part, everyone enjoyed the documentary. Although we all agree it could have been a lot darker and there were still some stuff to uncover. Well, I look forward to seeing what y'all have to say in the comments. Keep the conversation going in the comment section. But overall, give me your thoughts on what you felt about the documentary. Did you like it? Did you think they could have done more? But I enjoyed it. And definitely recommend it to other people as well. But that's it for me, y'all. I went for almost 3 hours talking about this thing. So if you watched it all, hashtag I watched it all. And thank you for making me a part of your day. As you file out, do all the YouTube things, like the video, subscribe, and click that bell to catch all my content when it comes out. Follow me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and donate using PayPal, Patreon, Cashapp, and VENMO. I love you all, and I'll definitely catch you guys next time right here in Alyx's world. The place that is, was, and forever will be a safe space for wrestling fans like you. See you in the next video. Peace. When you're when you're